Welcome to Queued Up with Ziz and Pam. The question on the table is, are we preparing students for life in the 21st century? And in our last segment, we didn't actually get to the question of how businesses would respond. We touched a little bit on colleges. We mentioned the article that was in The Atlantic and David Coleman, the CEO of College Board, who talked about a particular study from Gallup and Purdue University, how 3% of students aren't really having a transformative experience. So that leaves 97% of them out there. Simple math.
Yeah.
So, businesses and colleges, so what and how would you respond to that?
Well, I think businesses and colleges, I think really we just started our fourth industrial revolution, which we are in an entirely new and transformed economy.
So since you just brought that up, let's name it. I'm not really sure how many of our audience members are familiar with that particular revolution.
Okay. Well, it is a revolution. That's an excellent word. And many of you will understand it because you have been living through it. And it has transformed all our lives, from how we go to a hotel room to how we drive, how we get around, how we can now work from home. We can now study from home. So the first industrial revolution obviously was the agriculture to the factory. The second then moves into buildings, more systematized, then the information age, going into corporations, massive, huge corporations dominating the landscape. And suddenly we transform from those corporations, which have actually just declined 55% in the last 20 years. They don't hire as many people. They have what's now called the gig economy, whatever you might want to call it, that is growing 3 times faster than full-time employment. And we're creating these networks of people, as Ziz, you and I are doing, which is, or how I do with Kara when she creates all this. We don't meet all the time. We coordinate via the internet or some platform to interact. And so now if you need to get something filmed, you can ask your friend who's the videographer, who asks his friend who's the audio person, who asks his friends who's the editor, to come together. So we have this new economy that is very, very different, requires much more specific skills than being the generalists who were climbing up the corporate ladder. We have unbundled everything. We no longer just go to a doctor with a nurse, a clinic. We can now go to CVS and get our shots or have blood drawn or whatever it might be. So we've unbundled so many of our industries to very finite pieces of skills.
Just to put a little bit more framework around there, I was listening to Tony Robbins. Most people probably know who Tony Robbins is. If you don't, please just Google him. And he was with Dean Graziosi, and they were talking about knowledge brokering. We're in a knowledge brokering society. And like you just said, it's not about general knowledge, it's about specific knowledge. And if I remember correctly, I think it was Napoleon Hill in his book, Think and Grow Rich, talking about specific knowledge. And the individuals who became wealthy from a money standpoint, not necessarily, well, I'm only going to talk about wealthy from a money standpoint. They had specific knowledge to address and to add value to society. So yes. I think the point you just made is a really good one. So I'm curious, Pam, I understand yesterday you had a really cool session with parents.
Yes.
There was a teacher in the audience who asked some really poignant questions. And could you share that with the audience? Yes,
and actually what's interesting is it does tie into what is needed in the business world as well, because her first question, which was really profound, which was, do you have suggestions for helping teens manage schooling anxiety in this time of quarantine? And so the issue is, our schools are the, is the classroom preparing kids to go out in the world and operate with all these new skill sets that they're going to need. And what's happening is we are seeing it is not. And so most business leaders will say, even at the high school level, they are not prepared to enter the workplace. And so what's happening is businesses are actually stepping up. We're having corporations creating new training programs. And this is important. It is their responsibility. We have relied so heavily, and unfortunately to the detriment of so many teachers, that we've burned out to do everything to prepare our kids for being adults. But we all need to contribute, and businesses have a role too. So we have, in a place like Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a program that was sponsored by XQ Super School, which is the Emerson Collective program that is redefining education. So these business people came and said to the high schools, the local high schools, hey, we're not getting the kind of workers we need. We're not able to have the kids with the skill sets that they need, and we want to do something about it. So we will pitch to the students, not have it assigned to the students, pitch to the students what we're doing, and those interested could opt in, and they would go to school in the morning and go out into the business community in the afternoon, or the nonprofit. I mean, it could be somebody who's saying, I'm trying to get the plastic out of the river, and there'll be a student saying, hey, I want to participate in that. So they're combining this real-time experience of things that are actually happening in the world, because again, we can't prepare them fast enough in our school system, as well as having sort of the camaraderie and some of the other parts to school that kids value. And it's transforming the entire community because it's 5 high schools. You're not isolated to just one high school.
So when did that program start? Do you happen to remember?
Yeah, it was just a few years ago. I think it started maybe, gosh, 4 or 5 years. Everything's pretty new that we're starting.
Okay.
And based on necessity of the fact that the kids do not have the skill sets they need to operate in businesses today.
You know, the part, and I was not familiar with that, but the fact that businesses are pitching it to the students. So going back to that concept of getting them involved, asking them for their input, empowering them to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yes, no, I was supposed to on April 17th give a presentation that involves the San Clemente Chamber of Commerce businesses. Stance Socks has a beautiful headquarters. They were going to sponsor it, where we were doing just that. Saying, okay, who is willing to create job shadowing experience? Whatever your abilities are, this is an opt-in program. We're not saying everybody has to do it, but those who are able and view our children as our children, every child, and not just in school, the homeschool kids, the kinds of different schooling in the community. How do we create these opportunities for them to experience what's happening in the world today and develop the skill sets that then might take them to a post-secondary training program or to college if college becomes the appropriate pathway.
And so my mind naturally thinks, wow, when you actually have an experience, you're creating a resume, because now you have an opportunity to talk about how you've solved the problem, or how you've taken leadership, or be able to answer one of those questions that colleges currently ask on these admission essays. So they actually have some real world, tangible experiences that they can share. Mm-hmm. That's just awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, it's pretty fascinating. And also with how many schools like University of Chicago and even Chapman that have decided to go test optional. So if you're not spending all that time studying for a test to make sure you have a really high score, can you replace that time with developing experiences? Which, by the way, when I look at some of these articles about you have to have a college degree, and I go on Glassdoor and I go on all these Indeed websites, and I see college degree or equivalent experience. Because guess what? Some of the colleges, even if you get the degree, you have to get what's called last mile training. You need a certificate. You need to know. It's why, believe it or not, STEM majors So STEM majors, there was a study done by Harvard last year, and they studied over the past 10 years, people who had graduated in science, technology, engineering, and math. And what they found was within a 10-year period, 50% of them had dropped out of the 50% of them had lost their that salary advantage. They make 69,000 when they get out of college initially, compared to 47,000 of your average grad. But that advantage drops 50% over the next 10 years, and 58% of them leave the field. Why? Because we are no longer in that get educated, work, retire. It is constant upskilling. It goes back to what we talked about with the Navy. They're realizing that things are changing faster than can be taught in a classroom, and they have to be out there.
So going back to sports for a moment here, let's think about it as a teams that are very, very good. Let's just use Alabama or Ohio State, or you get the point. What happens, and the reason why they continue to do so well, is they're recruiting high school students to essentially replace the individuals that are already currently in the college. So for instance, let's just say the quarterback was really good. Let's say Tua, for instance, from Alabama. Unfortunately, he had a really horrendous injury, but the next quarterback that stepped up performed at a really high level. So what tends to happen is the competition on a team makes you better. And no one really wants it, so to speak. You're like, but because you have it, you have to get better in order to play. Because the bottom line, that what coaches want, if they want to win and be successful, is they have to play, or they should play the individuals who are performing at their highest level. So you're always contributing to the team. So with that type of culture, it's a culture of always improving and getting better and learning. So just the thought there, just throwing that out there.
Well, and then the only thing I would do to challenge that is that we've decided to apply that to everything. And the idea of individual achievement and constant competition, which is what our school systems and rankings are built on, has actually proven to be a disadvantage to so many, because they've lost the ability to just contribute their piece of the pie and be valued for that. So I agree, in sports, you need exactly that. I don't dispute that there are areas that you need it, but we have since applied that individual achievement be better than making other people, using them, which I think is partly normal, but we have just taken it on steroids and applied it to every aspect. And there's a story, a really good TED Talk by Margaret Heffernan. Have you seen it, on the super chickens?
Oh, no.
Yes. So
super chickens.
Let's talk chickens. Okay. So she has which we'll also put on our website. She has a TED Talk where she describes Purdue University deciding that they wanted to do a study to produce more eggs. And so what they did is they took the chickens and they watched, and they saw the super chickens. They saw the ones that really produced a lot. So they decided to separate out those super chickens from the regular chickens, and then see what happens over generations. So what's your guess?
I would say that the super chickens got bored.
Well, what happened, and I think of this analogy for us taking the people who compete the most and putting them in colleges, the elite colleges, and then what happens in this constant competitive mode where you're always competing, is what ended up happening, and she uses this for businesses, is that those chickens, when the super chicken was removed, they were healthy. They produced more chickens than ever, eggs than ever before. They were thriving. The super chickens pecked each other to death. They were constantly competing. They did not produce more, okay? They were in a different kind of environment as opposed to collaboration. Quite frankly, we would not be here on this earth without our ability to collaborate.
I agree. I love that. Great analogy. Super chickens. I I I see that. It totally makes sense. And what it makes me think about is roles and responsibilities. All of us have a role and we
Mhm.
have a responsibility. I'll use myself as an example. Having played football, I'll use my college example. I popped an Achilles in my in the
Oh,
fourth game of the season. So early in the season, it's the
oh,
fourth game. We're 3-0, having a really good season, and it just went kaboom, done. And it was, I was upset. I was crying, but um, the team that meant the next person had to step up. So I felt comfortable that a part of my work on that particular team is that I was in a supportive role now to
mhm,
help the others. And that
mhm.
was the responsibility of the coaches to create an environment where
Yes.
we helped others. And to me, the teams that I've been a part of that were most successful, we did that. We
Mhm.
had that camaraderie. We helped each other, even though sometimes we're competing for playing time. But it was we were there because we wanted the best for each other.
Mhm.
And I
That's
think,
beautiful.
yeah, and when I think about that, obviously, I mean, I still pay attention to football. It's not to follow it religiously, but the teams that I see that are successful, let's just use the New England Patriots for a moment. They have that type of system, so to speak. I've never played for them. I do know someone who coaches for them. They're able to import a person in from another team and they buy into that system. I am fortunate that I have a friend who's a head coach of a football team. It would be interesting just um, to be a part of asking him questions to see how he thinks.
Mhm.
He and I played on a team where we were being beaten by another team by a lot. I mean, we were down 31 points at halftime,
Ooh.
31 points. And the team that we were facing was the Miami Hurricanes. So they had a really good team. I think, I don't know, probably on that team they had like 8 or 10 people that went to the NFL and so on and so forth. Um, the moral of the story was our quarterback that came in, Frank Reich, he replaced another quarterback and he was able to lead us to a win, 42-40 over the Miami Hurricanes. So it
Wow.
had a lot to do with our head coach, the players, the type of spirit we had on our team. Also, our opponent. They were thinking, oh, we got them, big headed, so on and so forth. So speaking of collaboration and why we didn't peck each other to death is because we believed in each other and that we thought we could do better.
Mhm. And I think that gets to culture, right? It
Yes.
is, what is the culture? Is there a shared mission or meaning? And it doesn't, you do have those leaders that emerge and they need to emerge, but it's not devaluing anybody else.
Right.
It's looking at, I believe in friendly competition. I believe in the sports of whatever. I think it's part of our humanness. But on the other hand, we have evolved to have that be the constant, never ending, even in our homes. I mean, we move from the transactional part of school, which is, are you doing your homework? Did you turn in your assignment? Did you do this? Did you do that? And our home lives become command centers where we're doing that as well. Not, hey, I see you. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite poems that, or not poems, but questions, Maya Angelou, I say it to parents a lot, is she says, we're always unconsciously asking each other these four questions all the time. Do you see me? Do you care that I am here? Am I enough for you? Can I tell, can I tell that I'm special to you by the way that you look at me? So when we're sitting there and looking at our children to external goalposts and saying, okay, did you do your SAT prep? Did you do that? And moving them around, it's transactional. It is not a true engaged, I see you, as you were saying originally with your son, and I had to learn as well, which is that active listening component of, I see you. You're different from me. I understand that. You know, how do we work together?
So if parents and those who are listening, and even students, if you really want to delve deeper into this particular subject, look at Sara Blakely. And if you don't know who Sara Blakely is, she is the CEO and founder of Spanx. And she is the epitome of your framework read.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about her dad. Her dad, what her dad would do with Sara and also her brother, would he would ask them on a weekly basis, what have you failed at the dinner table? Now, now at the dinner table, asking that question, what have you failed at this week? So Sara goes on to say, and this just, from my understanding, she goes on to say that particular type of questioning allowed me to explore. It allowed me to explore. It gave me permission to go out and think and reflect and what can I do? And she consequently went on to found, to solve a problem, which was, and this is kind of funny as a guy, her white pants, she wanted to try to figure out how not to show those lines in those white pants. Simple question. The cool part is how she went about to solve the problem.
Yep.
And even to start the business, it's just so fascinating. So parents or anyone listening to this, she's a great example of why it's so important to be responsible, to explore, be adaptable, and also discover.
Well, and may I add one more thing to that? This is where the family dinner table is critical. We used to do best and worst. You know, at the family dinner table, it was like best thing that happened, worst thing that happened. And the worst thing was a time to give empathy, was a time to everyone to give voice to something that didn't work out, or how they felt stupid, or how thing was really hard, or they got hurt by a friend. And, the best was some, achievement, but we've decided that we only can hear best. We can't hear. And again, it gets to Viktor Frankl with his, this whole thing about positive psychology, that there's only one side of a balance sheet. No, humanness is both. There is a full range of emotions. So how do we allow for that?
You said so much in that. There's so many places to go with that. And in talks that I've given to students, is I say we live in a society where it's about highlights. Mm-hmm. Always about highlights. When we think about Bill Gates, if you really think about it, according to what I know about him, he was so passionate about coding. So by the time he got to Harvard, okay, he's at Harvard. Awesome school, obviously, Ivy League school, Ivy League institution, but he didn't graduate from Harvard because he said, I'm going to go out and build my business. And Steve Jobs, same thing, being fired from Apple. Probably the best thing that happened, because we wouldn't have some of the other improvements in technology because of that. So there's so many great things that happen because of failure. So just last night, I heard a Tony Robbins speaker, who said, failure and success are on the same road. Success is just a little further down the road.
Yes.
I'm going to say that one more time. Failure and success are on the same road. Success is a little further down the road. And I love that, because anyone who's tried to ride a bike for their first time, mm-hmm. when you fall down, you get back up, and you fall down again, you get back up, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the parent has to let go at some point, so that the child can get rid of those training wheels forever.
Well, and I will go one step further and say we only grow during times of struggle. And it's a part of being human. I mean, we don't get away from it. We just hide it with shame, instead of realizing that it's a very necessary part of us to evolve as human beings, for us to learn. It is essential. Failure is essential. That's why this whole thing about, we got to have a straight A kid. Whoa, you know, without allowing for that failure and the struggle, which is why this new movement towards mastery-based education and competency-based education is phenomenal,
Right.
because it talks about that, and it's getting away from the fact that some people grasp certain things more than others. So, but I think it is, the struggle is the growth.
Absolutely. And there's a really good chapter in Napoleon Hill's book called You Can Perform Your Own Miracles. That chapter on struggle hits all of the points that we're talking about. And like you said, it's a necessary part of growth.
Well, I actually wrote a blog about this called the butterfly emoji. So whenever my children would call and they'd be upset, and they do call, by the way, because I have 3 daughters, and they would call and, you know, something was hard and new experiences or whatever, and I would, or then they would follow up with a text and say something else, and then I would send them the butterfly emoji. That the butterfly, the caterpillar crawls in, it's dark. The only way they get strong enough to fly is to struggle. We're constantly trying to cut that cocoon open to help them get out, and they're too weak, right? We have to allow them to fly, and the only way they do that is to struggle.
That's a great way to end this segment. And we will definitely have that particular blog up on up on the website, because that's, you can't get any better than that. The butterfly needing to struggle in order to break free from its cocoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Pam, what an awesome subject. This is, I'm
So
so
fun.
excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to talk more about these things. And as we've said to you before, listeners, if there's any questions or concerns, or if you just don't agree with us, please share. We want to hear, we want to get better at what we're doing. So, you know, like we said before, queued up with Ziz and Pam. Thank you.